Yeah, we didn't do this one.
A large, strange device was discovered inside of this secret room in northern England in 2002. And today I'm going to share the awful truth behind it. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in
strike your
story
entire
format,
channel. Actually, Mr. Ballin not only followed me on Twitter, but he commented on my channel saying that I am free to use anything of his channel and he loves the content. So, boom, bam. I was hoping, because I followed him to see if, and like literally just to ask him if it was okay, and he's like, yeah, like you're good, bro.
And you come to
Mr.
the right
Ballin
place because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the Like Button's house the day before their wedding and replace their dress shoes with Crocs. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Get a poggers for Mr. Ballin? Wait, let me get on my Ballin hat.
At the end of 2002, 36-year-old Boyd Taylor was single, he had no children, and he lived with his divorced father, Robert, in a small bungalow in the northern England countryside.
Bungalow!
In addition to living with his father, Boyd also worked for his father. His father, Robert, owned a small construction business, and so the father-son duo built houses in the area. While Boyd might have envisioned his life turning out in a different, more exciting way, he didn't seem outwardly unhappy about his circumstances. In fact, he seemed very cheerful, both at work and when he was at home. But despite his cheerfulness, his father, Robert, was still pretty concerned about him, because every time Boyd had some time off from work and was just at loose ends, he wouldn't go out with his friends. In fact, he really didn't have any friends and wasn't even trying to make any friends. Instead, he would just sit in his room all day and be totally by himself. Now, Robert knew his son was naturally a bit of a loner and always had been, but a part of him hoped that his son would just start going out and meeting new people, or at the very least, develop some sort of hobby that could occupy his mind. In late September of 2002, Robert was walking down the hallway of their bungalow when he passed by his son's bedroom door, and it was shut, and as he walked past...
My son would never be cringe, chat. My son will always be epic. You know what his generation is called? Generation Alpha. Instantly is cooler than everyone. Instantly.
He heard inside of his son's room the sound of his son sawing some wood. And so he stopped for a second and he just listened. And when the sawing stopped for a second, Robert just knocked on the door. He was curious. He wanted to know what his son was doing. Boyd, instead of coming over to the door and opening it up and talking to his dad, instead just paused for a second and then said, you know, what is it, Dad? What do you need? And Robert would say, well, I heard sawing and I just wanted to know what you were building. And so Boyd pauses again and then just says, well, I'm working on a woodworking project. And so Robert's like, well, can I poke my head in and actually see what you're building? And Boyd, again, without opening the door, just tells his dad very politely that he wants to be left alone. And so Robert decides not to push the issue. Whatever he was doing, it was his business.
Oh crap!
And so
I
he just told his son that, you know, hey, if you need any help with anything, let me know. I'd be glad to help. A wooden penis. And then Robert walked away. Over the next 2 months, every time Boyd was not working, so in the evenings and on the weekend, he would be locked inside of his bedroom, hammering and sawing away at this woodworking project. And over those 2 months, Robert would periodically walk down the hall and stand in front of his son's bedroom and knock on the door and try to get his son to let him in to just see what he was up to, not only because he just wanted to see what his son was doing, but because Robert was a carpenter by trade and so was just genuinely interested.
Wanted to judge.
But every time he asked to be let in, Boyd would very politely tell his father that he really just wants to be left alone. And Robert
he's building an ark.
In early December, Boyd approached his father and said, hey, you know, would it be possible for me to take the next month off from work so I can focus on this woodworking project? Now, for Robert, this was a...
Dude, what if he's like... It would be the funniest thing ever if at the end of the video he was just building like a little birdhouse, and you show a picture of it and it's just like the jankiest birdhouse. Like, gotta take off a week of work, and at the end it's just some janky ass birdhouse. That would be awesome. That would
massive
be
inconvenience. This construction business that he owned was really just he and his son building the houses. And so if his son was not going to be working, then Robert would be solo on all of his projects for that month. But Robert's thinking to himself, you know, my son has finally found a hobby that he's really into. I don't really know what it is, but clearly he's invested.
I mean, as a parent, you need to figure out what's going on. You know, like, I'm not going to let my son work on something that he's just never going to tell me what it is. You know what I mean? Like, I would at least peek through the window or some shit. Like, I don't know. As a parent, I wouldn't really let that go. What made Pig stream on YouTube instead of Twitch this time? More views. Twitch sucks. Ratio, you fell off.
In it. And so he tells his son, you know what? That's fine. You take the whole month. And if you want more time in January, that's fine. You just let me know. So starting that first week in December, every time Robert would leave the house to go to work in the morning, he would leave to the sound of Boyd in his...
If you reply, I will shave my head. All right, clip it and ship it. Please send me a video of you shaving your head to my Discord now. Building a wooden dildo. Country boys make do, chat. Country boys make do.
Bedroom, hammering and sawing and tinkering away at his woodworking project. And then several hours later, when Robert finally came back home, he'd walk into the house and the first thing he would hear is his son still in his bedroom, still hammering and sawing away. When December finally ended and Robert expected his son to be done with his project and to finally show him what he's been working on, Boyd approached him and said, well, Dad, I'm not quite done with the project. I need about 2 more weeks. And so Robert said, no problem. We'll talk in 2 weeks. So December rolled into January and Boyd just continued to work all day long inside of his bedroom. Then on the evening of January 7th, Robert...
How have you not called an emergency meeting yet? How?
Was home. He was watching TV in the living room, and Boyd was hard at work in his bedroom right down the hall when Robert decided he was tired and he was going to go to bed. So he stands up.
My dad would have beat my ass. Same.
The living room. He goes down the hallway with his son's room on the right, and as he passed, he can hear his son at work, and he kind of yells to his son that he's going to bed. And then Robert goes into his bedroom, crawls into his bed, and falls asleep.
He's mining
at
Bitcoin.
3:30 a.m. the following morning, Robert is suddenly awoken by this incredibly loud crashing sound somewhere in his house. Robert's first thought was the chimney must have collapsed.
He created a time machine.
The sound was. And so he leaps out of his bed, he runs out of his door, he goes down the hallway past his son's room into the living room. He's stealing NFTs. He looks at the fireplace, which is in the TV room, and clearly the chimney has not collapsed onto itself. And so he's standing there thinking, you know, what else could that sound have been? And then he's thinking to himself, well, did I really hear that sound, or was that sound in my dream? And I kind of thought it was real, but it really wasn't.
There's no way.
And so just to be
sure,
he walked all around the house, kind of seeing if there were any signs of something big falling.
Why didn't you think to check your son's room?
And crashing on the ground, but the house seemed totally in order. And so he walked back down the hallway towards his bedroom. And he stopped right outside of his son's room.
Okay,
and he considered knocking and waking his son up to see if maybe he had heard this loud sound too. But when he listened to the door, it was quiet inside. So he figured, you know what, my son's asleep. I'm not going to wake him up for this. And so Robert just went into his bedroom and he went back to sleep. A few hours later, Robert got up and he left his bedroom. He went into the kitchen and he made himself some food. And as he's preparing his food, he's realizing that he doesn't hear the sound of Boyd working in his bedroom, because normally Boyd would be working that early in the morning, but he wasn't. And so right before Robert left to go to work that day, he actually walked down the hall and listened to his son's bedroom to hear if maybe he was at work in there, but he just hadn't heard him. But it was totally silent.
Hey, Dad, I made you a coffee.
He reached down to the doorknob, thinking maybe he could just poke his head in and see if his son was on his bed. But when he tried the doorknob, it was locked. So Robert just thought to himself, okay, I guess Boyd is sleeping in this morning, and so I'm not going to bother him. And so Robert...
What kind of dad is this? This baffles me, dude. What kind of, like, I don't know. I guess it's because, like, anytime if I ever wanted to do anything by myself, like, my parents would break down the fucking door. If I had the door locked, dude, my parents would straight up destroy my door to get in. So, like, yeah, this is crazy to me. This is crazy to me.
Leaves the house, he gets into his truck.
You get in trouble for locking doors in my house? Yeah, same.
Several hours later, he comes back to the house at night. He walks inside, and the first thing he hears is nothing. It's silent. And this house in the evenings for the past several months was never quiet.
He's been dead
Boyd was always hammering, sawing, and tinkering away at this woodworking project. And so right away, Robert's thinking to himself, maybe he's done with the project and I can finally see this thing he's been working on. And so Robert drops his stuff at the door and he walks down the hallway. He goes to his son's bedroom door and he knocks and says, hey, Boyd, are you done with your project? But he's met with silence. And so Robert reaches down again and tries the doorknob, but it's locked. And so Robert's standing there thinking, it's too early for him to be asleep. And so he yells out for Boyd, hey, what's going on? Where are you? I haven't seen you today. Come out here. Come talk to me. But again,
it's worse
it's
than
silent.
you think.
And
It's
so Robert's
always
thinking,
worse
okay,
than
well,
I think.
when I pulled in, was
It
his
always
car
is.
in the driveway? And he can't remember. And so he...
Okay, chat. What do you think it is? Actually, should I say that? I was thinking guillotine. I'm not going to lie. I was thinking guillotine. Straight up.
He leaves the house,
That's
he
what I
goes
was
out
thinking.
to the driveway, and sure
I'm just
enough,
gonna stick with that.
there's Boyd's car. It's in the driveway, so he has to be here. And so suddenly, Robert's starting to feel a little bit panicked about his son.
Big box,
he runs
definitely.
back into the house, and he just starts screaming his son's name as he goes room to room into the bathrooms and the other bedrooms to see if he's in
Sex
there,
machine
but he's
gone
nowhere to
wrong.
be found. And so operating on a gut instinct, Robert just runs right out to his car. He gets a sledgehammer, comes back in the house, goes down the hallway, and he's standing in front of his son's bedroom door. And one more time, he yells for his son and bangs on the door, tries to get his son's attention, but after once again there being total silence, he picks up his sledgehammer and begins breaking the door down. And after a couple of swings, he manages to pop off the locking mechanism, the actual doorknob. That gets blown off, and he can push the door open, and he sees inside the bedroom is empty. There's just a bed and a dresser, and there's no Boyd. But in the back right corner of the room, where normally there was like this alcove, basically a segment of his room kind of jutted away from the rest of the space, almost like it was a closet, but with no door on it. Boyd had clearly built a wall and door over that alcove, kind of creating a sort of sub-room within his bedroom. And this door was shut. And so Robert immediately runs over to this new second door. He tries the doorknob, it's locked. He yells for his son, but again, after silence, he picks the sledge up and begins trying to break this door down.
Just keep hammering, Dad.
After
Keep
a few
hammering.
good swings, like the first door, he was able to knock the doorknob off of the door, and then he reached down and he pulled the door open, and what he saw on the other side of this door, inside of this little sub-room, was so far from anything he ever expected that he just stood there in stunned silence. And then eventually reality kind of kicked back in, and he ran out of his son's room and he called the police. 3 months earlier, Boyd had decided he wanted to build this very specific device that was invented in 1789. Now, he didn't want his father to know about this device, and so he built that door and wall frame in front of that alcove specifically so he could build this device inside of this new sub-room in privacy. He also always made sure to lock his main bedroom.
Any takers? He went to Narnia. Did he build like a cupboard? Went to Narnia?
Door.
I'm
so
still
for
thinking
3
guillotine.
months, Boyd began constructing this 8-foot tall, 3-foot wide structure inside of the subroom. And once the shell of this device was constructed, he began installing all of its inner workings. These included things like various lengths of wire and clock timers and a jigsaw, which is like an electric saw. And then finally, on January 7th, it was complete. So that night, Boyd blew up an air mattress and he slid it inside of the subroom right underneath this ancient machine he had built. And then after that, he went and locked the main bedroom door. He went into the subroom himself and shut the subroom door and locked that. And then he pulled 12 sleeping pills out of his pocket, swallowed those, and then laid down on this air mattress on his back, looking up at the inner workings of this machine. And then once he was positioned the way he wanted to, he reached over.
Okay, so he definitely was committing suicide in like I guess the weirdest way possible.
Up inside of this machine, and he felt around for a button that he had placed. He pressed that button, and then he put his hands over his chest, and he laid there looking straight up until the sleeping pills kicked in, and he fell asleep. That button he pressed right before he passed out from the sleeping pills started a timer, and when that timer went off, it would actually activate this whole device. And so several hours after pressing that button, the timer finally went off at 3:30 a.m. The first thing thing that happened when this device was activated is the jigsaw, the electric saw, began sawing this wire. Now, the wire had been very intentionally placed against the teeth of this jigsaw, and so it's cutting this wire, and this wire is supporting this weighted down, heavy, angular blade that's pointing straight down. And so as soon as this wire is cut, it releases the blade, and the blade that almost looks like this oversized axe head begins falling straight down this chute, and the chute aims the blade directly onto the front of Boyd's throat. Boyd's woodworking project was a guillotine, and that loud crashing sound that woke Robert up at 3:30 in the morning on January 8th, that was the sound of the blade of this guillotine.
What an awful father. Your son was building a suicide machine for months, didn't check one time, and your son's dead. You could have prevented your child's death. You had months to prevent your child's death.
Crashing down and decapitating his son. Even though Boyd did not leave behind a note explaining his actions, it was determined Boyd's death was in fact a suicide, a very complicated and deliberate suicide. Boyd's father and other people involved in this case have come to the conclusion that Boyd was clearly showing signs of depression before he chose to take his...
And he had so many opportunities. If his father just cared about him, no wonder he was suicidal, dude. His dad didn't give a shit. What the fuck? Bald as a pig now. Thanks for that, mate. Send me a picture now. On Discord now. Oh, yeah, chat. We should... Wait, let me see. Does this work? It doesn't fucking work. Okay. Whatever. Thank you for $5, Kyle. You ever thought about a collab with Scott Kramer? I think I know him, but I don't really collab with people because I don't really ever get the opportunity to collab with people. I mean, if he ever wanted to, sure. I mean, yeah, sure, why not? But I mean, I don't really know him. But yeah, like, no wonder your kid committed suicide though. Like, straight up. Like, he deserves #1 dad. Dude, he deserves something. Like, the dad deserves, I guess, negligence. Something about being negligent. It does. I don't have Discord, then I don't believe you. Thank you, Kimi, for becoming a little pooper. Thank you for coming pooper. For poop. Pooper. Thank you so much.
And so maybe
it'll
if
pop
Boyd
up in a
had
sec.
reached out for help, or if there had been some sort of intervention, his death could have been prevented. And if you or anyone you know is struggling with mental health, remember you are not alone. No matter how bad it feels, there are resources out there.
Chat, you want to know? Because I've heard a lot of stories of suicide, and I've dealt with like people being suicidal, people attempting to do suicide, etc. Most of the time, it's because the reason they end up committing the suicide is because no one shows up. Now it's time to walk away. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Did you laugh or cry or maybe subscribed? I'll thank you either way. You know I will miss you. I hope you return. Tell your friend or your mother to get me more views, please.